everyone, and welcome to the University of Nottingham PGCE webinar. My name is Helen Spiropoulos, and I'm the Admissions Manager at Stafford Associates. And joining me this evening all the way from the university is Dr. Rupert. Good evening to you, Dr. Rupert.
Hi, Helen, and hi to everybody listening or watching. Nice to speak to you today.
Okay, and I see we do have quite a lot of attendees this evening, so welcome everyone. I'm going to start the webinar right now, just telling you a little bit about Stafford, and then I'm going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, who will take you through the slides. And right at the end of the presentation, you can type in your questions, and Dr. Rupert and myself will be able to answer them. Okay, so who is Stafford? We are a resource center that is based in the Middle East. We were established in 1993. And we were basically here to assist students throughout the registration process for at least 5 UK universities, one of which is the University of Nottingham. We do offer a variety of programs, starting from certificates to diplomas to bachelors, MBAs, MScs, right through until doctorates. And our main function, as I said, is to provide you with the recruitment process, with the administrative process, as well as giving you some academic support. And I'm now going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, who will take you through to the slides. Over to you, Dr. Rupert.
Thank you, Helen. Okay, so I'm going to speak to you from the university's point of view now, and I'm going to tell you about the University of Nottingham, firstly, about the PGCEi course and how that's structured and what you can expect. We'll talk about some of the common things that people want to know about modules and assessment and materials and so forth. And at the end, we'll see if we can get some of your questions and answer some of those. And if there's anything that we can't answer today, then we will try and get back to you later on. I can communicate with you via Stafford, and I'm sure we can find out anything if it's not immediately obvious. So let's start off with thinking about the University of Nottingham itself as a place to study, because on this course you'll be very much a University of Nottingham student, of course. The university, as you can see from the slide here, is highly ranked globally. So you've got the university placed 70th in the international rankings. And what it doesn't say here, but what we should add, is within the field of education specifically, the university is ranked 4th in the UK for its teaching and education, so behind Oxford, Cambridge and London, and 3rd for education research. So you can see that the university, which is part of the exclusive Russell Group within the UK, is not only a strong institution and has a well-known name and brand around the world, but specifically in education, it's one of the top departments in the UK out of many universities. And you can see the quote from the Times about being a global university. So that applies not only to courses like this, which are international, but also to the fact we have campuses abroad as well. So we have a campus in China, one in Malaysia. So it is a university that reaches around the world. And it's a university that is known for research and for leading the field, and that would go particularly in the field of education. So it's a good place to study, and it's a name that will be known around the world for education with a great reputation. So if we just think now about the PGCEi course, the Postgraduate Certificate in Education International. So this is a master's level program of study, and it's what we would call a blended learning program. So what that means is that it's a combination of face-to-face teaching and distance learning through extensive materials online. So there are 2 face-to-face events in the year, depending on when you start. Our next cohort, as we'll see in a later slide, starts in March, but we have cohorts starting each year in March and October. We always have a face-to-face event very early on, so part of your induction to help you get to grips with how to study and the early parts of the modules, is taught in the UAE by a team of tutors, including me, who come out from Nottingham and work with you face to face. So you get to know your tutor. You've met this person, they've met you, and you know, we really know the people we're going to be working with. So we started an October cohort off just a few weeks ago. So a couple of weeks back, I was in the UAE doing some of this teaching myself. The second face-to-face event in the year happens about halfway through. So when you've completed the first couple of modules, the second face-to-face event happens, and we move your learning on, and we introduce the third and fourth modules. As we'll see in a minute, there are 4 modules on the course. The good thing about the face-to-face events is not only are you having that teaching, and not only is your tutor then a real person who you've met, but it's also that peer learning. So all of us as educators have a danger of getting into a kind of bubble in our own place that we work, and we all can get sucked into what we do every day without really having a chance to look at beyond that and to reflect. So actually meeting with people from all over the Middle East who are teaching in all sorts of different schools, in different systems, in different countries, different types of school, is a really powerful thing to do. So that's a big part of the face-to-face events. It's that peer sharing as well as what you get from the tutors here. It's a course that, as it says here, is a master's level course. It isn't a course that is giving you a license to teach or a qualified teacher status in the sense of evaluating you in the classroom. So this is not a course where we're going to be seeing your classroom practice. We're not going to be assessing your classroom practice. So it's important to recognise it's an academic programme of study. But it's an academic programme of study that will really enhance your resume. And maybe more importantly, from my point of view, it'll also get you thinking about education in new ways. So when I was teaching in schools, which is my own background, when I was a full-time teacher in school, I did my master's course at the time, and it really refreshed what I did. You know, it made me step back a little bit, it made me think, it made me question some of the things I did, and it really relaunched my teaching and made me a much, much better teacher. So although the course isn't really about practical tips for the classroom, and it's not about assessing you in the classroom, it is going to have a big effect on what you do in the classroom and how effective you are. So let's move on and have a look at the structure of the course. So the structure of the course here is, as I've said, based around 4 modules. So these are compulsory modules, so there's no selection of modules that you make, but within the module there's a lot of opportunity to personalize what you do. So there are 4 modules that have an equal weighting. They're all 15 credits, and you complete those in the course of a year. And so each module has broadly an equal amount of time that you spend on it. And we like to think of these modules as being a bit like a journey that you undertake. So there's a kind of sequence and there's a logic to working through this. So the first module you do is called Contexts, and that's all about the purposes of education. So it's about the values that underlie education. What is education for? Are we trying to fill up learners with lots of facts and knowledge? Are we trying instead maybe to create learners who are good citizens for the 21st century? Are we interested in developing learners' moral thoughts and values and character? Are we interested in developing skills that are transferable? Are we interested in traditional school subjects or a more integrated way of learning? So there's all kinds of ways of thinking about education, all sorts of different philosophies. And we encourage you to think about that. And the first module also has a particular focus on international education. So teaching in an international context. What does an international school mean? Is it about having international staff? Is it about an international curriculum? Is it about teaching international values in some way? What does that actually mean? What are the different ways we might think about international education? So the second module, once we've had some thinking about what education is for, is all about how your students learn. So whether you're working with students in a kindergarten age, an early years age, through primary, secondary, into more adult learners, how do students learn? What are the theories of learning that have been influential? How do they differ? What are the pros and cons? Which things might be relevant in certain settings? Which things might you use at other times? So we take a good critical evaluative look at different ways of learning. Having done that, the third module follows quite logically on, because it's to do now with teaching. So now we know what education is aiming to do. We know a bit about how students learn. How might we then organise our teaching? What are the ways that we might structure learning? How would we deal with diverse needs of learners, for example? Would we maybe want to introduce some collaborative practices into our classrooms? So there's all sorts of things that we look at that are to do with the organisation of your teaching. And then the final module, that is called here Final Project, is a chance for you to do a little bit of research in your educational setting. So we take as our theme the idea of students' understanding. So if we've just talked about how we might organise the teaching, a logical thing to ask is, well, how would I know if students have understood what I've taught? So we get you to pick a topic of your choice and to investigate students' understanding in that particular area. And you do that by collecting a bit of data in school. It might be through observations or interviewing pupils, for example, and you write a very small scale research report. So those are the four modules. The things to say about each module are that you're going to relate that topic to your own setting that you work in. So if you work teaching a particular subject, you're going to be writing about that subject. If you work with a particular age group, for example, you're going to refer to that particular age group. So this is something where you can tailor it, and you can tailor your reading to your own context and your particular role in school. And you can also make selections from materials in modules 2 to 4 in particular. You can select certain materials that you want to read and bring into your work, and others that are less relevant. So there's a lot of chance for you to make decisions and make choices, and make sure that this really applies to what you're doing. Each module is assessed in the same sort of way. There's a 3,000 word assignment. That sounds daunting sometimes. There are no exams. This is all a coursework approach. But it's not as daunting as it sounds, because we provide a lot of structure for that assessed work. So each module has what we call process work, which is activities that you work on that are online on the virtual learning environment that you have access to. And you work through those activities in a very structured way. And by doing that, you then produce a piece of coursework that you submit to us, that we can give you some brief feedback on, and we can check your understanding. And then that leads you to creating a proposal for your assignment. So you tell us what you want to write about, you tell us what your plan is going to be. Again, your tutor can check those things and check you're okay and you're on the right track. And then finally, you produce your assignment. And also, as an added structure for the first module, you get to also submit a draft. So before you submit your first assignment, you submit a draft assignment. Your tutor gives you feedback on that, and you have a chance to develop the piece of writing before your first graded piece of work. So there's a lot of structure there. And often people are worried because perhaps they haven't studied in this sort of discipline before. They haven't studied for a long time sometimes. And it's quite common to feel a bit insecure about those academic skills. But lots of people feel like that at the start of the course. And lots of the input that we do when we meet you face to face is about building up your confidence and really clarifying what's required. And that process I talked you through just now, that also helps you to build up to that assignment. So things are put in place to make that less worrying for you. So the course itself is a master's level course with 60 credits in all, so 4 modules, 15 credits each. If you want to finish after the year with that qualification, you're getting your postgraduate certificate in education. That's the basic qualification, and that may be all that you want to do. But the good thing is that what you've also got by doing that is you've got the first part of a full MA. if you want to continue with that. So if you wanted to continue onto an MA in education, it doesn't have to be immediate. You could take some years out before continuing. You've got credits that you can transfer. You've got 60 credits, which is a third of a full MA. So you've done the equivalent of the first year of 3 years of an MA, which means that you would then just work as a part-time student for 2 further years and complete your MA. If you wanted to do a more specialised MA route, you can see some on the screen here, like special needs, TESOL, the Teaching English MA, or Educational Leadership and Management. Then, because they're more specialised, you transfer 30 credits instead of 60. Most students probably will transfer to the general MA and carry across all 60. So that's a choice that you've got. You don't need to decide at the start. You can decide when you've begun your study, or towards the end, or even a bit later on, but you have those credits. The second point on the screen is about the materials. So we've said that you have your face-to-face events, but when you're not with us, you've got a whole wealth of learning materials online, really high quality materials. So you've got course notes, you've got readings, you've got links to our electronic library, so you can read journal articles, books, all sorts of things. Some of those are embedded in the course materials, so we tell you to read certain things that are particularly important. Other things are optional, and you can follow your interests and read additional sources from the reading list. All of that's available online. That's all part of the course. The materials also include things like video clips, sound files, so you've got that sort of multimedia experience. You also have the support of your tutor, who you've met at the beginning of the course. So at the moment, for example, my latest group of students that I met a couple of weeks ago in the UAE, they are contacting me with questions about things. One student has just asked if they could have a Skype tutorial, and that's something we can do as well. We can arrange a time to talk on screen like this. So you've got your tutor support from a named tutor, and you've also got each other, because you met those colleagues at the face-to-face event, and we put you into groups of usually around 18 to 20 with the tutor, so you get to know that smaller group quite well. And during the course there are various online forums, so as you work through the tasks and the materials, we ask you to post comments on particular forums that everybody can access, and you can then read other people's thoughts about the work you've been doing. So if you've all been thinking about a particular issue and you've been working through something and reading something for a module, you'll post your comments and other people on the course will post theirs, and you get the benefit of a discussion from all of those other people. And some of those forums are global forums. So the PGCEi course doesn't only run in this region, it runs all over the world. And right now there are something like 900 or more students studying the course in continents all over the world. So some of the forums that you put your comments into are accessible to cohorts from all over the world. So that's really fascinating to see people studying the same topics that you are and putting their thoughts and their experiences there. And they might be working in South America or Europe or Africa or all sorts of places around the world. Okay, so hopefully you like the sound of what you've heard so far. So if you were to pursue this and you wanted to get onto this course, you can see on the screen here the basic entry requirements. It's a postgraduate course, as you can tell from the title of it. So your normal requirement would be an undergraduate bachelor's degree. And you can see here with, usually with at least second-class honours. There are ways of getting into the course occasionally for people that don't have that first degree. So although the first degree is standard and you're going to be studying at a postgraduate level, sometimes there are exceptional cases, which I'll talk about in just a minute. It's worth also noting here that if English isn't your first language, if it's not your native language and you didn't study at school, for example, in that language, you need to also provide your IELTS qualification. You can see the levels here. So you need to be somebody, it says here, you need to be an established educator. So what that means is you need to be somebody with access regular access to an educational setting, to a classroom. So usually you would be a teacher in a school, or you might be a teaching assistant in a school. That would be the typical profile, one of those two categories. But you may be working in a different way in an educational setting. Occasionally we have people who are volunteering, so they're not yet employed in an educational setting, but they're volunteering and they have access to classrooms. One of the reasons why you need that access is because in each of the modules we ask you not only to write about the theory and the readings and things that you've engaged with, but to relate all of that to your setting, to your classroom. So you're going to be writing about things that you have seen in school, that you do in school. You're going to be reflecting on specific lessons for certain modules. You're going to be even trying out perhaps some ways of teaching. You're going to be gathering some data in the final module. So these modules, the strength of them is that they all relate to your practice. But of course that means you need that classroom access. And of course, as we've talked about, a lot of this being through materials online, you need to make sure that you have the access to computer and internet. I mentioned non-standard applications a little bit just now, but if you are somebody who doesn't have a first degree, that is an exceptional position, but you may be able to make a case for yourself. If you've got extensive experience teaching in school, if you've got other qualifications that are relevant, if you've been working for quite a number of years as a teacher, for example, there may be a professional background or other academic background you have, which gives us some confidence that you would still be a suitable candidate. So the advice would be to think of that as an exceptional and an unusual position, but if you feel you can make a good case for yourself, do apply, and we'll look at those cases on an individual basis and see whether you have enough there, and whether we feel you're going to be successful on the course. So you can see here a list of the things you're going to need in order to apply, which are probably fairly straightforward. I'll just talk about a couple of those things though. One of them would be the reference. So it asks for you to provide a reference, and of course what I'd say is, particularly if your application is maybe a non-standard one, try and pick a referee who is most able to comment on your educational capacity, someone from a school ideally. If you have a different sort of referee, if you have an employer from another sector, they may be able to talk about transferable skills and relevant things, but it's most powerful if you've got somebody who can talk from an educational point of view and is an educator, a teacher themselves, and can say, yes, this person I think would make a very good teacher and therefore is going to be very suitable on this course. With the personal statement, the kinds of things to put in this that are particularly important would be being very clear about your motivation. So what is it that you're hoping to get from this course? We've already said that it's something that should help your career. It's something that looks really good on the CV or the resume, but also that it isn't a license to teach in itself. So really, you want a deeper motivation as well. You want a motivation about being a better educator, about learning about education, making a difference to your practice. So tell us why you want to do the course in a persuasive way. Talk about your education experiences, of course. What are they? But go beyond just describing what you've done, like a big list, and try and reflect on that. So what have you learnt? What are the issues in education? What have you discovered from your experience, whether it's years or whether it's much briefer period? What have you noticed from being in schools and working with learners of different ages? And of course, the other thing would be to highlight transferable skills. And in particular, are there not only professional skills, but are there academic skills that you have? So have you got something that demonstrates your ability to study at this level, your ability to manage workload and balance things, because the majority of our students are working while they're doing this course, and I would say the majority of them are working full-time. So that's quite a commitment. So while that's very achievable, how can you demonstrate a track record in this? Have you done this before in some way? So are you good at prioritizing? Are you good at managing different tasks? Are you good at communicating? So all of these things are important to mention as well. Okay, so you can see here that we are looking at the moment at the next intake, which would be in March. As I said, there are usually intakes in March and October, so the next one would be in March, starting the 1st of March. And then there would be workshops, those face-to-face events that I said here, in March, and the second set would be in October if you started in that cohort. You can see also here the financial information, and that's something that Stafford will deal with you through and talk you through. And finally, we have arrived at the questions section. So we're going to do our best to answer any questions that you have. We're going to see if perhaps Helen can gather together some themes that I can address, because often people have similar questions, and you know, we can probably deal with several people at once. Okay, so I'll hand over to you, Helen, for a moment.
Excellent, thank you. I hope you can hear me, Dr. Rupert.
I can, yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, the very first question is from Fuzzy, which is a very common question that we do get. Does this qualification qualify me for Cutie Ace?
Okay, so yeah, this is a really common question, and a very understandable question. So the first thing to say is that the QTS specifically is an English qualification, so qualified teacher status, if you're not familiar with that. So this is something that relates to the UK and relates to the government as a qualification in England and Wales. So as such, it can only really be conferred in England and Wales, and in a few schools in other parts of the world that have special license to do that. So it's a sort of domestic type of qualification. So in that sense, first of all, the course doesn't give that QTS element. It also, in a more general sense, doesn't give a license to teach, because in every region, not in the region we're dealing with here, but all around the world, in every country, there are different requirements for this kind of professional qualification, and they will be assessed differently in different parts of the world. So you would be advised to check locally with with schools wherever you're hoping to work, to find out whether what their requirements are, whether there is some kind of license that they require, or whether an academic qualification like this is sufficient. Sometimes it may be that you need both. So you need to just find that out locally, because it will vary regionally. The other thing to say though, and I don't know whether this was where these questions are coming from, but sometimes people ask about the QTS element because they're thinking of maybe going to work in the UK at some point. So they're thinking, well, if I go to the UK, will I have a qualification I can take back? So you wouldn't have the QTS, but there are ways of getting your qualified teacher status in the UK without doing a further program of study. So there is a route that we call assessment only QTS, where you can work in a school and be teaching as an unqualified teacher, and while you're doing that, you can be assessed just purely on your practice and evidence that you collect of what you do, and usually within about a term you could achieve that QTS status if you do that in selected schools. So that's not a qualification that University of Nottingham offers, but there are lots of other providers in the UK, other universities who do offer that. So depending on where you wanted to work, you could do some research online looking for the assessment only route, and you could find out where you'd be able to do that later if that's your interest.
Excellent, thank you, Dr. Rupert, and that actually answers Mina's as well as Razia's questions, because they were actually quite similar. Okay, Nomvula has got a question regarding the face-to-face meetings. Is it only based in the UAE, and what is covered in the meetings?
Yeah, so we have cohorts around the world. So there are groups that you're able to join elsewhere. We have a group here in Nottingham which meets every summer, and we have groups in countries all over the world. In terms of this region, the meeting is in the UAE, so that is the only meeting that we have, those two face-to-face opportunities. In terms of what's covered, there's a mixture. We try and keep a nice balance. We have a mixture of you getting to know us as tutors, you getting to know each other and benefiting from that peer collaboration that I mentioned before. We have an introduction to the idea of working at this academic level, academic writing, how to write in a critical way, how to reference your work correctly. So some of those skills that people sometimes worry about. We have an introduction to the modules as well, and the big ideas that are contained in those modules, and an introduction or induction into the ways of working, so the ways of using the online materials, the requirements of what you submit and when, all of those details. But we don't want the face-to-face event to be only about those kind of procedural things. You know, they're important, they're really reassuring for participants to know about, but we also want to send you away with a bit of thinking. So we want you to actually go away feeling challenged in your assumptions, so thinking about education in a different way. So we're going to involve you with hopefully engaging sessions and ideas that get you to look at education and to reflect, so that you go away maybe with your head spinning a little bit with some new ideas as well. So it's a mixture of, you know, getting you familiar with the procedures, but also giving you some of that kind of stimulating input and some of the big ideas.
Great. And Sheila has a very interesting question, which a lot of the students do ask, is how many hours should we dedicate to this program on a weekly basis? Okay.
So, you know, a usual equation we might do would be about 150 hours for a 15 credit module. So that module, each module of the 4 would be spread over a few months. You can imagine dividing up the year. So we're going to have, you know, two or 3 months spent on each module. One way of looking at it sometimes is you might, this is a very rough guide, but you might think of about 12 hours a week as being a good amount of time to spend. So that sounds quite scary if you've got a full-time job perhaps, but people handle this in different ways. So some people develop a habit of doing a little bit every evening, and they might just do, you know, a couple of hours each evening, or get up early in the morning and do a little bit. Other people will prefer to work in one big chunk, and they might dedicate a Friday or a Saturday and just say that I'm going to work all day and do this one day a week, and I'll work in a concentrated way like that. It's something that does require commitment, and it is something that you can think, well, can I fit this in on top of what I'm doing already? What I'd say to you is what I said in the presentation before, that the majority of people we work with are working full-time. And while it's a challenging thing to do, it requires commitment, it requires great organisation and time management. It's something every year that people succeed in, and you know, the vast majority of our students come through the course, they succeed in managing all of those demands and getting that work done. So it'll be a very busy year, I can promise you that, but it is something that is very doable. Each year at the first face-to-face event, I try and invite back one of last year's students to speak to the new cohort. And one of the things that they always say is, you know, last year I was sitting here and I just didn't know how I was going to fit all this in, but it can be done. And so that's powerful to hear from a student who's just done that. And often the new students kind of believe that student maybe more than they believe us. But it is achievable.
Excellent. And Omar, thank you for the useful session. Thank you very much, Omar. His question is, he's giving tuition to autistic children on a one-to-one basis. Would this be considered as teaching experience, and will I be accepted on the program?
I think it depends really whether that's private tuition or whether it is in a school. And we'd have to look at that application, you know, perhaps on an individual basis. I would say certainly if it's within a school context, but you are some kind of perhaps learning support assistant or specialist teacher, and you're working in a school context on that one-to-one basis with pupils with autism, for example, that would be fine in principle. That's the sort of thing that some of our students do each year. If you are more of a private tutor, I think that's something where we'd have to look and question it and perhaps look at the case individually, because some of the modules relate to things that go on in schools. And so it is about being connected to a school setting. But certainly if you're in school and you are working you know, with small groups or individuals within a school setting, that's something that we have each year, and that's fine.
Okay, Paul, I can see your question. If you can just try and get in touch with your academic consultant, we'll be able to give you more information on what perhaps is required in your environment, in your school, what you can look at for additional qualifications. Can you teach in the region? As Dr. Rupert has said, it does actually vary from region to region in the Middle East. So do get in touch with us and we'll be able to assist you with that. And Guy, I can also see your question. Yes, I would like you to again email your experiences and qualifications, because you sound like you do have quite a bit, and our academic consultants will then be able to advise you accordingly. We'll also be looking at your qualifications as well, and we'll be able to tell you if you are eligible for the program. So do get in touch with us for that. Okay, and Rabia's question, is there a mentor that can support me in the practical sessions in the school? Okay,
yeah, so that isn't a formal part of the course. So the course is really looking at the academic side of this, and it's that sort of program of study. So we don't liaise directly with schools, and we don't have any particular requirements for you to be mentored in school or assessed in school in that way. So it isn't part of the course. As a separate parallel thing to do, you might be able to negotiate yourself with the school and have somebody who can help you and work with that practical side of things, and that would be certainly a very useful thing to do. But it's not something that's built into the course.
Okay, and Mohammed's question is, you know, how many modules are there? And can you just give us a little bit of background on each module, just very briefly, what is covered in each module?
Yeah, so I won't go into too much detail here, and we talked a little bit about it before, so I don't want to repeat too much. But 4 modules, each module is 15 credits of study. And the modules, the first one is about values and aims of education, and also international education specifically. The second module is about theories of learning, different theories of how students learn, and very, very diverse ideas, all sorts of things. Some of them you may have come across before, some of them you certainly won't have done. Third module is about teaching. It's about things that go on in the classroom in terms of organising your teaching, catering for different needs, different styles of supporting learners, structuring lessons, that kind of thing. And that one, we get you to actually plan a sequence of lessons in school. It could be for a class, or it could be for a small group of learners, or even one learner. And you relate that sequence directly to some of the things you've been reading. And the fourth module is your mini research project, where you research students' understanding of a concept, and that will be a concept that will relate to whatever you teach. So if you are a science teacher, you might be looking at students' understanding of what floating and sinking is all about, for example, or whatever you're studying, and you, with your tutor's help, come up with a plan for how to collect some data and how to find out about that and report that. And the idea of that final module is we're trying to leave you with a sense of you being able to continue to develop. So we've helped you through that final module to inquire into your own practice and given you some of the tools to do so. So the idea is that after that, not as part of this program of study maybe, just in your daily practice, you'll be much better able to think about questions or problems in what you do, and to find out ways of researching them informally and coming to some kind of conclusions that improve your practice. So that's an overview really of the 4 modules.
Excellent. And Lavania's question is very similar to another one from a participant. What is the time period given to complete an assignment?
Okay, so each module stretches over probably about 10 weeks or so, something like that. So between 2 and 3 months, depends on where holiday periods fall. We tend to give a bit longer for module 1 because we allow time for you to do a draft. The assignments, therefore, you could begin working on the assignment right at the beginning of that module. So you could work on it over a period of months. But really, what you're going to do first is you're going to work through the course materials, and you're going to do those activities. So that's your first step. You then get to your stage of producing a proposal for what you want to do the assignment on, how it's going to be focused. You get feedback on that. And then you've got a number of weeks to finish or to work on the assignment. So usually people would be working on the assignment in the last few weeks of that module, but you could begin it from the very start. So as soon as you enroll on the course, you have access on the VLE, on our site, to all of the modules. There's no material that's held back from you and released at a different time. So from the very first day, you can see all of the assignments and everything is there for you. So if you're somebody that prefers to work in a steadier way and gradually build up, you can begin as early as you like and work in that way. Some people prefer to work to a deadline in a tighter way at the end. So the time varies, but each module is going to be spanning over sort of 2 to 3 months of study.
Excellent. And Guy, yes, I can see you have quite a few questions there, but you're very welcome, as I said, to contact us. You're very welcome to contact me directly, or you can have a chat to your academic consultant at Stafford. And yes, we are available via Skype. If Skype is an easier form of communication for you, we can definitely do that and assist you throughout your application process. Okay, Rabia, I'm working as a full-time teacher in an early years setting. Now, will this actually help me in that particular section, or is this a general program?
Okay, so the program is general, so the materials that you work through, the readings, everything that you do that we provide is general and would apply to all age groups. However, certainly it would be applicable to working in that sort of early years setting that you describe. Every year we have a number of people. There are a number of people in my current group, for example, who are working with that age group, with perhaps our youngest learners. So you can use what we provide and apply it to any age group, because we're looking more at the sort of the general principles of education. And then within each module, I've mentioned that you have an element of choice about what you read, which bits to study in depth. So there'll be some things that are more relevant to certain age groups or certain subjects, and you can tailor things in that way. But what you'll find is there are a lot of transferable ideas, and one of the things that you'll get from meeting other people at the face-to-face events is that somebody who's teaching 16-year-olds is going to learn a lot from you as maybe a kindergarten educator, and you will learn also a lot from them. In my own background was originally in school as a primary age teacher. Now I teach adults, and the same kind of principles apply. You know, they're all the same things that make some good learning. The principles of how people learn and how to structure that learning would apply in very similar ways for 7-year-olds or 37-year-olds. So there's no problem at all with that age group.
Okay, excellent. And Amber and Lavanya have a similar question. Will I be able to progress to an MA after I have completed this PGCE?
Yep, so as long as you've passed all your 4 modules, and we talk to you at the face-to-face events about our assessment criteria and what the different grading systems mean, we do that in some depth. As long as you've passed all those modules and you've got all your credits, then yes, you can progress to an MA, and on the MA you then get to choose different modules, You might be doing a general MA, or you might do one of the more specialist ones that I've mentioned. And the MA, whichever route you do, would typically have a year where you do 2 modules, if you've already done your PGCEi course. And then the final year would be a dissertation year, where you work towards producing one big piece of work, which is all about your own area of interest, and in some great depth, and you're supervised by a tutor through that year. So yes, you know, every year we have people who progress to the MA. It's something that we love to happen, because some of the same tutors from this course also work on the MA. I'm currently supervising an MA student who has come through the PGCEi course from another part of the world, for example. I bumped into somebody here on an MA summer school back in July who was from my group a couple of years ago in the UAE. So we love it when that happens, and this region, meeting in the UAE, probably has the highest rate of people around the world, I think, who do make that transition.
Excellent. And we have a question from Nomvula. After I complete my course, where can I go to the UK to get my certificate? Can I attend the graduation, or can the certificate be sent to me?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and the answer is yes to both. So you'll certainly be invited to a graduation, so it's great if we see people who come here to Nottingham. You can tie that into a holiday, depending on which cohort you're in, whether you start in March or whether you start in October. That will obviously affect when your graduation is, but it would typically be either in the summer or at Christmas, so always at a time when you can be away from work. And yes, some people come to graduation here in Nottingham, and that's great, and we get tutors, you know, where possible, will be there and see you, and you can really feel you're part of the university, and just be graduating there on stage with hundreds of other students, which is great. If you're not able to come and do that, and of course lots of people are not able to, then you can graduate. We call it graduating in absentia, which means that you're not at the ceremony, but you still graduate and you get your certificate, and that's sent to you. So that's not a problem. So if you can't come in person to pick it up, no problem. But if you can, it'd be great to see you.
Super. And Mohammed's question is, does this certificate have the same value as regular PGCE qualifications offered in the UK?
Yes, it does. It does have the same value as PGCE qualification. It's the same level. It's a program of master's level study as students in the UK would study. The important thing to recognise, though, and the thing that might be behind your question, is if you study a PGCE in the UK, what you're actually doing is studying 2 things at once. You would be studying in the UK a PGCE and a qualified teacher status, professional qualification. So I work with PGCE students in the UK, for example. They are doing study very much like the PGCEi work, but they're also assessed in school, and they're getting a professional qualification in school at the same time. So that second part of it is not what you're getting. So you're not getting that Cutie Ace, that qualified teacher status. So that's different. But the academic part, which is what the PGCE actually is, the Postgraduate Certificate, is the same. It's an equivalent level and equivalent status.
Excellent. And I see there's a final question from Paul. How are the assignments graded? What is the grading system?
Okay, so this is a little bit different from what you may have had for undergraduate study, where often you'd have first class, upper second, lower second, third class, that kind of thing. So we work in bands, and the bands would go from pass, being the lowest of the pass bands. The next one up would be merit, and after that is distinction. So if you get work in any of those bands, then that means you've passed the assignment. We will work with you and give you feedback to try and make sure that you do as well as you possibly can. So each piece of work, each assignment gets a mark, and the mark will indicate which band that piece of work sits in. So for example, if you received a mark of 53, you would be in the pass band. If you received a mark of 78, you would be in a distinction band. So what happens is at the end of the course, you've got 4 different marks, and there's a calculation done to see what your overall mark would be. And that will then put you into one of those bands, and that will give you your final outcome. Whichever of those bands, pass, merit or distinction you're in, you've still succeeded, you've still got the PGCEi qualification, and we have people in all 3 of those bands every year, nice spread of different grades. The bit about whether you have a pass, a merit or a distinction, I guess would come into play more if you are progressing onto the MA, because then you're carrying forward credits that are at a certain level. So obviously people want to do as well as they can, and people, you know, everybody would like to have a distinction and work towards that level, which is great. But any of those bands constitute a pass.
Excellent. And Mohammed, your question regarding the payments, please do get in touch with your academic consultant at Stafford. The payment is actually done on installments, very, very flexible installments. So do get in touch with your academic consultant and we'll be able to give you more information on that. And a very last question again from Mohammed. Does the program continue during the summer holidays?
Yeah, so the if you start in the March cohort, which will be the next group, that is going to go across the summer. But you can work flexibly and sort of manage your time. So there will be deadlines throughout the year. So if you're starting in March, there'll be deadlines that go through to usually around January or so. That of course does span the summer. And during the summer, everybody has different requirements, different holiday dates. So there wouldn't be a face-to-face teaching session during that summer period. So if there's any concern about having to be in the region and available, that there's not a face-to-face session. The face-to-face sessions are in term time. They're in March and October. And if you're on the October starting cohort, you'll be in October and then March, but it's always those times of year. So yes, study goes on over the summer, but there isn't a face-to-face requirement. So if you're somewhere else in the world, you've gone to, you know, your family elsewhere, wherever that might be, that's not a problem because the course materials are there available online. You can be studying wherever you want to be.
Okay, excellent. And Kizan, it's Kizran. Kizran has a question. I understand that the course requires classroom access, but I do have a specific number of years of work experience in education. Would I be accepted onto this program? Well,
you need to have current classroom access. So even if you have worked for a long time, and have lots of experience, which is going to be very, very helpful, you're still going to need access during the course. So that's the important thing to say. If you aren't currently working in a school, if you're able to secure access as a volunteer, and that's regular access, that would still work in almost all cases. But you will need current access because the modules will require you to go into school and look at certain things, to write about certain things, to try things out. So it's not possible to base it purely on things you've done in the past, if that was what the question was getting at.
Yeah. Okay. And that seems that we've actually cleared all the questions. I think it was a fantastic session. Thank you so much again, Dr. Rupert, for joining us. Again, thank you everyone for participating. Your questions were wonderful. And as Dr. Rupert has said, it's a very popular program. Do get your applications in as soon as possible. There are limited seats available in this region. And hope that we'll see you at the next cohort. Okay, again, thank you so much, Dr. Rupert. A good evening to you. A good evening to everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much, and it's been great to talk to you all, and hopefully we'll meet sometime face to face. Okay, bye.
All right, bye-bye.